Everyone in Rivergate knew that Jacob Cross had a white Moonlight. Her name was Penelope Hart. She came from a respected family, had perfect manners, and never gave anyone a reason to dislike her. People also knew she had a boyfriend, Armando Sterling. The Sterling family was one of the oldest and wealthiest families in the country, and Armando had spent the last 3 years following Penny around with open devotion. Everyone knew that too. Everyone except Jacob, apparently. Or maybe he knew and simply didn't care. His girlfriend had stopped trying to figure it out. Samara Quinn sat alone in the VIP lounge of the Crescent Hotel, waiting for the man who was already 38 minutes late. Her assistant quietly placed a tablet beside her. The auction starts in 5 minutes. Samara nodded. I'll still attend. And Mr. Cross. Her phone rang before she could answer. Jacob. She accepted the call. I'm stuck in a meeting. His voice sounded impatient. The overseas investors won't stop talking. Samara looked at the empty seat across from her. I see. I'll come as soon as I'm done. You don't have to. I said I'll make it. He ended the call without waiting for a reply. Her assistant carefully watched her expression. Should I tell the organizers you'll be attending alone? Yes. The auction began. A sapphire necklace appeared under the lights. Samara liked it. She placed a bid. 5 million. Someone challenged her. She casually raised it to 10 million. The room fell silent. The hammer came down. Sold. At the same moment, her phone buzzed. It wasn't Jacob. It was a message from one of her friends. Look familiar. A video opened. Someone had recognized Jacob at the luxury shopping district less than 10 minutes earlier. He wasn't in a meeting. He was standing inside a boutique, while a sales associate carefully wrapped a small velvet box. The caption under the video read, Mr. Cross buying another gift for Miss Hart. He never gives up. The comments were already exploding. He's so loyal. True love never dies. Didn't he have a girlfriend? Poor girlfriend. Samara watched the 15-second clip twice. Then she locked her phone. Her assistant noticed the change. Miss Quinn, I won't need to reschedule dinner. No. No. She picked up her bag. I think we're done. Outside the ballroom, guests arrived one after another. A familiar voice stopped her. Excuse me. Samara turned. A woman in a white evening dress stood a few feet away, looking at her with polite curiosity. I'm sorry, but have we met before? Samara stared for a second. They had the same dark hair, similar eyes, same mouth, and almost the same height. She really understood why strangers always compared them. No, Samara answered. That's strange. The woman smiled sweetly. You look so familiar, almost like I saw you in the mirror. A man walked over and naturally slipped an arm around her waist. Penny. Armando, don't we look alike? Armando glanced between them and nodded once. Enough that someone might confuse you. Samara's phone vibrated. Jacob. The meeting is still going. I won't make it tonight. I'll bring your favorite dessert tomorrow. Samara looked from the message to Penny standing in front of her, perfectly relaxed beside the man who looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Then she thought about the velvet gift box in the video. She wondered if Jacob even realized thousands of people had already seen him buying it and knew it wasn't meant for her. Because his gifts were never meant for her. She quickly typed one sentence. Don't contact me again. Then she blocked his number. Across from her, Penny blinked. Is everything okay? Samara looked at the woman who had accidentally haunted her relationship for 3 years. There was no triumph in Penny's face. No hidden agenda. Only confusion and concern for a complete stranger. Samara smiled for the first time that evening. It is now. Oh, good, Penny replied. Then after a beat, she grinned mischievously. I hope you don't mind me saying it, but you're ridiculously pretty. Samara's smile shifted to a smirk as they naturally started walking together. She knew what Penny was doing. They looked so similar that complimenting the other was almost the same as complimenting herself. She was just arrogant enough to join in. You're pretty gorgeous yourself. Someone blessed you with those eyes. Penny giggled. Samara extended her hand. I'm Samara. Penny. I know. I've heard your name too. Samara nodded. Makes senses. Neither woman noticed Lucas Sterling stepping out of the car behind Armando. He had come to pick up his younger cousin after the auction. Instead, his attention landed on the woman walking away with quiet confidence. Armando followed his gaze. Don't. Lucas didn't look away. I didn't do anything. You have that look. What look? The one that says you're about to be trouble. Lucas watched Samara disappear into the crowd. Who's that? Armando sighed. My girlfriend's future best friend, I think. Find out her name. Armando sighed. You know, she didn't seem like she was having a good night. Lucas nodded once. Then tomorrow should be better. Jacob Cross slept surprisingly well. He woke up, checked his phone, and frowned. Samara was still blocked from his contact list. He tapped her profile again. Message failed. He wasn't concerned. She had done dramatic things before. Ignored him for a day. Left his messages on read. Canceled dinner. This was the same thing. Just slightly more annoying. His mother looked up from the breakfast table. Where's Samara? Jacob poured himself coffee. She's upset. About Penny again. He shrugged. She'll get over it. Mrs. Cross nodded. Samara always did. For 3 years, she had been patient. She never complained when Jacob skipped dates. Never argued when he canceled plans. Never caused scenes. She was beautiful, gentle, and completely devoted. At least that was what the Cross family believed. Mrs. Cross smiled. Take her some flowers tonight. Jacob shook his head. She likes desserts more. His father folded the newspaper. Don't neglect her too much. I won't. The conversation ended. No one thought the relationship was actually over. Because Jacob certainly didn't. Across the city, Samara was also eating breakfast. Unlike Jacob, she had an entire schedule waiting for her. Her assistant placed a folder on the table. The chairman wants to see you. Samara nodded. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The chairman. Officially, he was the head of Quinn Capital. Unofficially, he was her grandfather. Very few people knew that. The Quinn family valued privacy above everything else. Samara had grown up outside the spotlight by choice. Even Jacob had never asked many questions. He knew she lived comfortably. He knew she owned a nice apartment. He knew she invested well. He had absolutely no idea that the apartment building belonged to her family. Or that half, the shopping district, carried the Quinn name. The top floor of Quinn Tower occupied an entire city block. Executives stood the moment Samara entered. No one looked surprised. They simply greeted her. Miss Quinn. Good morning, Miss Quinn. Welcome back. Samara walked straight into the chairman's office. An elderly man looked up from his tea. You look happier. I broke up with Jacob. He nodded once. About time. Samara laughed. You saw it coming. I have eyes. He poured another cup of tea. I was beginning to wonder if you enjoyed suffering. She accepted the cup. I kept hoping he would see me. And he didn't. Her grandfather just smiled. His loss. At 11 o'clock, Jacob finally decided to call Penny. She answered after several rings. Hello. I bought something for you yesterday. Is why. I saw it and thought of you. There was a pause. Jacob, I know you don't like expensive things, but I'm having lunch with Armando. So I'm hanging up. The call ended. Jacob stared at his phone. A second later, another message arrived. From Armando. You're being weird. Stop buying gifts for my girlfriend. Jacob frowned. People just didn't understand. He wasn't trying to steal Penny. He just wanted her to be happy. There was nothing wrong with that. At the same restaurant, Penny sighed. I'm sorry. Armando set down his fork. You apologize too much. He means well. He keeps sending you jewelry. I return it. He keeps sending flowers. I donate them. He writes letters. I don't read them. Armando reached across the table and took her hand, smiling. I know, I trust you. Penny squeezed his fingers. Thank you. Lucas Sterling stepped out of the elevator exactly 3 minutes before his meeting. His assistant handed him a tablet. The Quinn Capital representatives have already arrived. Lucas nodded. Then the opposite elevator opened. Samara Quinn walked out carrying an iced coffee. She noticed him first. The Sterling cousin. Lucas looked at her. And you're Samara. She wasn't surprised. Armando told you. He talks. So does Penny. For a second, neither moved. Then Samara looked at the folder in his hand. Investment meeting. Unfortunately. She lifted her coffee. My condolences. Then Lucas looked at the coffee in her hand. Good. Samara glanced at the cup. Very. Should I try it? If you like caramel. I do. She held out the untouched drink. You can have this one. Lucas accepted it without hesitation. His assistant nearly dropped the clipboard he was carrying. Samara noticed. I was going to order another anyway. Lucas took one sip. It's good. I know. A small smile appeared. Neither of them noticed the silent audience. 5 executives. 3 assistants. 2 receptionists. And 1 security guard. Every single person watched the exchange. After Samara disappeared into another elevator, Lucas handed the coffee to his assistant. The assistant blinked. Sir, I already know she's connected to Quinn Capital. See what else you can find. And yes, sir. Inside the elevator, Samara looked at her own reflection. Then she laughed quietly. She had given a stranger her coffee. Last time she has done something like that was when she first met Jacob. He had told her the cupcake she just bought looked good, and she was so stunned by his good looks, she shoved the cupcake into his hand and ran. It made sense it happened again with Lucas. He was even better looking than Jacob. At least she didn't run this time. Across the city, Jacob finally received a notification. Message could not be delivered. He stared at the screen for a second, then put his phone away. She's still angry. His friend looked over. What if she actually dumped you? Jacob smiled. She won't. He sounded completely certain. Unfortunately for him, he was the only person who still believed it. Jacob Cross decided Samara had been angry long enough. 2 days was enough. 3 would be excessive. He stopped at the bakery she liked on the way over. The owner recognized him immediately. The usual. Jacob nodded. Pack 2. He also bought fresh flowers. White lilies. Samara once mentioned she liked them. He couldn't remember when. Only that she did. His friend glanced at the passenger seat. So you're apologizing. Jacob looked confused. I'm cheering her up. His friend opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was no point arguing. The Quinn residences stood in the center of Rivergate. Private, Quiet. Ridiculously expensive. Jacob had visited dozens of times. The concierge greeted him with a familiar smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. Cross." Jacob nodded. "I'm here to see Samara." The concierge checked the screen in front of him, then looked up. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cross." "For what?" "Miss Quinn instructed us that you are no longer authorized to enter the building." Jacob laughed. "She's still angry." "I'm simply following instructions." Jacob pulled out his access card. The scanner flashed red. "Access denied." He frowned. He tried again. Red. Then he used the resident elevator. It didn't move. His fingerprint. Rejected. His face scan. Rejected. Even the valet politely handed back his keys. "We're no longer permitted to park your vehicle in the private garage, sir." People walking through the lobby began looking over. His smile finally disappeared. "Call Samara." "I'm afraid we can't." Across town, Samara wasn't thinking about Jacob at all. She was having lunch. Penny happily placed another plate on the table. "You have to try this." Samara looked at the mountain of desserts. "We ordered enough for 8 people. I got excited. Armando nodded. "She always does." Samara picked up a spoon. "It would be rude to waste food." Penny's eyes brightened. "I knew we'd get along." Lucas arrived 20 minutes late. He walked into the private dining room and stopped. 3 people looked back. Penny waved. "You're late." "Meeting." Armando didn't even look up from his phone. "You say that every time." Lucas sat down. Then he noticed the extra slice of cake already waiting beside his plate. He looked at Samara. She shrugged. "Penny ordered enough for a wedding. We're helping." Lucas accepted the explanation without question. An hour later, the 4 of them left together. Penny spotted a small handmade jewelry store. "Oh." Armando immediately stopped walking. "You want to go in?" "Maybe." "Let's look around." Penny smiled. "You're enabling me." "Obviously." Samara laughed and walked inside with her. Lucas followed a step behind. Penny held up a pair of earrings. "Too much." Samara studied them. "Not enough." The sales associate quietly brought out another tray. Then another. 20 minutes later, Penny had purchased 1 elegant pair. Samara had somehow bought an entire matching collection. Penny stared at the stack of velvet boxes. "I thought I liked jewelry." Samara looked genuinely confused. "Did I overdo it?" Back at Quinn Residences, Jacob was still standing in the lobby. His flowers were beginning to wilt. His desserts were getting cold. A black luxury sedan rolled to a stop outside. The concierge immediately walked forward. The doors opened. Samara stepped out first. She looked relaxed. Penny climbed out behind her carrying shopping bags. Armando reached over to take every single bag from Penny before she could protest. Lucas stepped out last, handing a caramel coffee to Samara. Samara accepted it with an easy smile. "Thank you." She turned and noticed Jacob standing in the lobby holding flowers and desserts. Penny noticed him a second later. "Why is he here?" she asked, annoyance threading through her voice. Jacob stared at the group. His eyes landed on Penny. Then Armando. Then Lucas. Then Samara. Finally, he held up the flowers. "Samara." She looked at them. "They're beautiful." Relief spread across Jacob's face. "I knew you'd like them." Samara shook her head. "You should give them to someone who isn't allergic to lilies. Maybe you were thinking of someone else when you bought them." She walked past him. The concierge immediately opened the private entrance. Penny paused. She looked from Jacob to Samara. There was a long silence. Then Penny slowly reached into one of her shopping bags. She pulled out a small velvet box. This was delivered to my house yesterday. She handed it back to Jacob. I was going to return it by courier. Jacob stared at it. The exact same boutique from the video. The exact same wrapping paper everyone had seen online. Armando naturally took her hand. Penny smiled at Jacob. I'm really happy with Armando. Jacob didn't answer. He simply stared at the velvet box, now resting in his palm. Lucas hadn't spoken once. He simply watched Samara. She wasn't jealous. She looked finished. Completely finished. Samara glanced at the concierge. Can we go upstairs? The concierge immediately opened the private entrance. Of course, Miss Quinn. She turned to leave, then looked back one last time. Take care, Jacob. No bitterness. Just polite. The private doors closed behind the four of them. The concierge turned back toward Jacob. I'm sorry, Mr. Cross. Jacob didn't answer. He looked down at the flowers in his hand, then at the desserts, then at the closed doors. His phone buzzed. His mother. Did you make up with Samara? Jacob typed a reply without thinking. Not yet. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. After all, Samara had always come back before. He saw no reason this time would be any different. High above the lobby, Samara stood by the window of her apartment. She could still see Jacob below. Penny walked over beside her. He's still standing there. I know. Should we say something? Samara smiled. No. Penny watched Jacob for another second. Then she nodded. Okay. Neither of them looked outside again. 3 days after the apartment incident, Jacob Cross was finally annoyed. Not worried. Annoyed. He placed another call. Message failed. Another. Message failed. He looked up. She blocked my work phone too. His assistant nodded. And your personal number? My email. No reply. My social media. Also blocked. Jacob frowned. She's being childish. His assistant wisely remained silent. Across the city, Samara was shopping with Penny. Again. Penny held up a summer dress. This one. Samara looked up from a necklace display. You own 3 exactly like it. They're different shades. They're identical. They have different feelings. Samara accepted that explanation immediately. Fair enough. Armando sat on a sofa carrying 6 shopping bags. Lucas stood beside him. Neither man complained. Armando looked completely relaxed. Later, someone snaps a candid photo. Samara and Penny are walking side by side. Similar heights. Same dark hair. Same smile. The internet immediately loses its mind. Are they sisters? No, they're just ridiculously pretty. The one in black keeps making the one in white laugh. Wait, isn't that Jacob Cross's girlfriend? Ex-girlfriend. Good for her. Jacob stares at the picture for a long time. His friend looks over. You okay? Jacob slowly shakes his head. I don't understand. What? Why are they friends? Because in Jacob's mind, Samara and Penny are rivals. Everyone else has already figured out that the only person creating that rivalry was him. Meanwhile, Penny held up 2 bracelets. Silver or gold? Samara pointed. Gold. You answered too quickly. I own the silver one. You do. I bought it last month. Penny gasped. We have the same taste. Armando looked at Lucas. It's like they're becoming one person. Lucas watched Samara laughing. I noticed, he said, chuckling. Jacob pushed his phone across the table and crossed his arms. Call her. His friend looked at him. Why me? She blocked me. That's usually on purpose. Use your phone. His friend sighed and dialed. A second later, a pleasant automated voice answered. The number you have reached is unavailable. His friend looked up. She blocked me too. Jacob frowned. Why would she block you? I'm pretty sure it's because I'm friends with you. Jacob frowned. Lucas reached for a bottle of water. Samara reached for the same one. Their hands bumped. Both paused. Penny noticed immediately. She looked at Armando. Armando looked back. Neither said anything. Penny slowly smiled, pleased. Lucas picked up a different bottle. You can have it. Samara looked suspicious. You already gave me coffee. You gave me coffee first. Samara blushed thinking about, and she shoved her coffee into his hands at the office. She stared at him for 3 seconds, then nodded once. Okay. Penny quietly tugged Armando's sleeve. I like your cousin. I know. I meant for Samara. I know. That evening, Jacob sat in his office. His friend walked in holding a tablet. You should probably see this. Jacob looked down. Someone had posted photos from the shopping district. One picture showed Penny laughing with Armando. Another showed Samara beside her carrying matching jewelry bags. Another showed Lucas holding shopping bags while the two women compared bracelets. The headline read, Who is the new quartet taking over RIVRJT? The comments moved faster than he could read. Those two women look like sisters. The Sterling brothers have incredible taste. The brunette in black is gorgeous. Wait, isn't that Jacob Cross's girlfriend? Ex-girlfriend. She blocked him after the auction. Good for her. Jacob frowned. They're shopping together. His friend nodded. Jacob didn't understand. That didn't make any sense. Samara was supposed to dislike Penny. Instead, they were buying jewelry together. He stared at the pictures again. Lucas was carrying Samara's bags. Armando was carrying Penny's. The four of them looked comfortable. Natural. Like they had known each other for years. Something unfamiliar settled in Jacob's chest. Not jealousy. Confusion. His phone rang. His mother. Did you apologize properly? I brought flowers, lilies. There was a long silence. Then Mrs. Cross sighed. Samara is allergic to lilies. Jacob froze. Even his mom knew that. He searched his memory. An emergency room visit 2 years ago. He remembered now. A quiet voice asked from across the desk. Mr. Cross. Jacob looked down at his hands. For the first time since the breakup, he realized something uncomfortable. He remembered Penny's favorite flowers immediately. But he had forgotten Samara's allergy. Later, Samara was sending Penny pictures of necklaces they had tried on. Penny replied instantly. Buy the moon one. Samara smiled. Already did. Lucas watched the tiny smile appear on her face. He didn't ask why. He simply made a mental note. She smiled more when Penny texted back. For some reason, that made him smile too. Weeks later, Penny decided Samara needed a hobby. Samara disagreed. I have hobbies. Penny counted on her fingers. Shopping. Yes. Collecting jewelry. Also yes. Buying desserts. I don't see the problem. Armando looked up from his coffee. Those are your hobbies too. Penny ignored both of them. We're going to a pottery class. Samara frowned. I've never made pottery. Perfect. Lucas quietly finished his coffee. I've never made pottery either. Penny smiled. See, nobody can embarrass themselves. An hour later, the instructor looked around the studio. Everyone find a partner. Penny immediately grabbed Armando's hand. We're together. The instructor nodded. Lucas looked at Samara. Samara looked back. There were no other people left. I suppose we're together. Seems that way. 10 minutes later, Samara's clay collapsed. She stared at it. It was almost bowl. Lucas looked at the pile. It still has bowl potential. She looked suspicious. Are you lying to make me feel better? A little. She accepted the answer. Thanks. The instructor walked over. You need to use both hands. Lucas moved his wheel closer. Like this. Samara copied him. The clay slowly took shape. She looked genuinely pleased. I made a circle. You did. It's almost symmetrical. If you say so. For some reason, she laughed. Across town, Jacob walked into Quinn Residences again. The concierge smiled politely. Good afternoon, Mr. Cross. Jacob nodded. I need to see Samara. I'm afraid that's still impossible. Jacob sighed. I know. The concierge reached under the desk. I do have something for you. Jacob looked surprised. A small envelope. Inside was a letter. His parking pass. His emergency visitor key. Every privilege he had accumulated over 3 years. Revoked. Just a receipt acknowledging everything had been deactivated. He stared at the cards. The concierge waited patiently. She really means it. I'm unable to comment, sir. Meanwhile, Penny was decorating her pottery bowl with tiny stars. Armando's bowl somehow looked professionally made. Samara's looked slightly crooked. Lucas's looked almost identical. Penny blinked. You made matching bowls. Samara looked down. We did. Lucas compared them. Oh, we did. Armando smiled into his coffee. Of course you did. Pictures from the class appeared online that evening. Someone captioned them. Double date. The typical comments arrived instantly. The girls look like sisters. The Sterling cousins have her so gorgeous. The woman in black keeps accidentally matching the taller cousin. That's kind of adorable. Jacob stared at the photos. His friend walked into the office. You've been looking at those for 10 minutes. They're at pottery. Oh, yes. Why are they at pottery? His friend rubbed his forehead. Because people have hobbies. Jacob looked back at the picture. Samara had clay on her cheek. She was smiling. Not politely. Not for a photograph. Actually smiling. He couldn't remember the last time she had smiled like that around him. His phone buzzed. His mother. Did Samara answer yet? He looked at the picture again. Then typed 3 words. Not this time. That night, Samara carried a slightly uneven ceramic bowl into her apartment. She placed it on the kitchen counter. It leaned a little to the left. Penny immediately sent a message. Mine cracked in the oven. Samara took a picture of her own bowl. Mine survived. A second later, another notification appeared. Lucas. A photograph. His bowl. Leaning to the left. Exactly the same. Samara looked at the 2 pictures side by side. Then, for the second time that week, she laughed out loud. The following Monday, Samara's assistant placed a new folder on her desk. Today's schedule. Samara glanced through it. Meeting. Lunch. Site inspection. Charity gala. She nodded. Looks normal. Her assistant hesitated. It isn't. Samara looked up. The Sterling group requested a joint project. A Lucas. Yes. Samara closed the folder. That's manageable. At Sterling Group headquarters. Lucas was reading the same schedule. His assistant looked knowingly amused. I can move the meeting online if you'd like. No. We can send Vice President Chen. No. We can postpone until next month. Lucas looked confused. Why would I do that? No reason. Meanwhile, Jacob had developed a new morning routine. Wake up. Check if Samara unblocked him. She hadn't. Check social media. Find another picture of Samara smiling somewhere without him. His friend walked into the office. Bad morning. Jacob turned his phone around. Another article. RVRGT's new favorite friendship. The first picture showed Samara and Penny carrying matching shopping bags. The second showed Armando opening a car door for Penny. The third showed Lucas standing beside Samara while she laughed at something off camera. His friend looked. They seem happy. Jacob frowned. They spend a lot of time together. Oh, yes. The Quinn and Sterling executives were already seated when Samara arrived. Lucas stood. Everyone else immediately stood too. Samara blinked. You don't have to do that. Lucas sat back down. They copy me. The executives nodded. They absolutely did. The meeting lasted almost 2 hours. Every proposal was approved. Every discussion finished early. Even the lawyers looked pleased. One executive whispered, "This is the most peaceful negotiation I've ever attended." Another nodded. They keep agreeing with each other. When the meeting ended, Lucas looked at Samara. Lunch. She thought for exactly 2 seconds. Okay. Across the conference table, 12 executives suddenly became very interested in organizing their documents. The restaurant overlooked the river. Samara opened the menu. Lucas looked at his. Neither spoke for almost a minute. Finally, Samara asked, "Do you always eat this quietly?" "Sometimes. It's comfortable." "Yes." She nodded. "This is nice." "It is." Halfway through lunch, Samara's phone rang. Her assistant. "Miss Quinn." "What happened?" "There was a small incident at one of the shopping centers." "Anyone hurt?" "No." "The insurance company needs authorization." "I'll handle it this afternoon." Lucas looked up. "Problem?" "Just one of our properties." He nodded once, then paused. "Our?" Samara took another bite of dessert. "The company." Lucas accepted the answer without asking another question. Across town, Jacob was filling out paperwork for an investment conference. Emergency contact. He automatically wrote, Samara Quinn. Then stopped. He stared at the name. His assistant noticed. Mr. Cross. Jacob slowly crossed it out. For the first time in 3 years, he realized he didn't know who else to write. That evening, Penny arrived at Samara's apartment carrying 2 boxes. "I brought cake." Samara opened the door. "Come in." 5 minutes later, Armando arrived. He was carrying 4 more boxes. "I brought the rest of the cakes," he said dryly. Lucas arrived last. He looked at the mountain of desserts. "How many people are coming?" Penny smiled. "Just us." Samara looked at the table. "There are at least 11 cakes." Armando answered calmly. She showed remarkable restraint. Penny accepted the compliment. They spent 3 hours tasting tiny slices of every dessert. By the end, nobody could decide which one was best. Lucas quietly pushed the final strawberry cheesecake toward Samara. "That was your favorite." She blinked. "You could tell. You did a little happy dance after biting into it," he said, laughing slightly. Penny immediately looked at Armando. Armando was already looking at her. Neither said a word. Neither needed to. At almost the same moment, Jacob opened social media one last time before bed. A new picture had already gone viral. 4 dessert forks. 4 drinks. 4 plates. Someone had captioned it, The RIVRGT4 strike again. The top comment had over 30,000 likes. The woman in black smiles a lot more lately. Jacob stared at the sentence. Then he opened his gallery. 3 years of photos. Samara smiled politely. Samara smiled for family dinners. Samara smiled for birthdays. Samara smiled for holidays. He kept scrolling. He couldn't find a single picture where she looked as happy as she did eating cake with 3 people she had known for less than 2 months. For the first time, annoyance disappeared. Something much heavier settled in its place. The following Friday, an elegant cream envelope appeared on Lucas Sterling's desk. His assistant placed it beside his coffee. From Quinn Capital. Lucas opened it. A single card. QUINN Capital 40th Anniversary Gala. By invitation only. Dress code, black tie. He glanced at the bottom. Guest invitations had been personally approved by the chairman. Lucas looked up. Are we invited as investors? Yes. He nodded once. Then we'll attend. Across the city, Penny burst into Samara's apartment without knocking. Samara. Samara looked up from a financial report. Penny dropped onto the sofa. What are you wearing tonight? A dress. What color? Dress colored. Penny covered her face. This is the Quinn Gala we're talking about, and this is your attitude. Samara considered that. Help me pick. An hour later. Garment bags covered every chair. Jewelry boxes covered every table. Shoes covered the floor. Armando stood quietly in the corner. Lucas had arrived 10 minutes earlier. Neither man had been allowed to leave. Penny held up 2 gowns. The right one or the left one? Samara looked. They're both black. They're completely different. Samara pointed. Left. Penny gasped. I was thinking left too. Armando smiled. I know. Lucas watched the exchange. Then noticed Samara quietly trying to escape toward the hallway. She made it exactly 3 steps. Penny caught her wrist. No. I was getting water. You have water here. Samara sighed. I've made a mistake. Lucas laughed. It was brief. But Samara heard it. She looked over, staring for a beat too long. You laugh, she joked to cover how long she stared. Sometimes, he smirked. I thought you came with factory settings. For the first time since they met, Lucas smiled without trying to hide it. That evening, the Quinn Grand Hotel glittered with lights. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Reporters crowded behind barriers. Every major business family in Rivergate had received an invitation, including the Cross family. Mrs. Cross adjusted her necklace. I've always wanted to attend this gala. Mr. Cross nodded. The Quinn family rarely appears in public. Jacob looked around. Who are we meeting? The chairman, if we're lucky. Inside, executives lined both sides of the entrance. Every guest was personally welcomed. Jacob stepped through the doors. People greeted him politely. Nothing unusual. Then another car arrived. The conversation around the entrance stopped. A concierge hurried forward. The rear door opened. Samara stepped out. She wore a simple black gown. Only diamond earrings and the moon necklace Penny convinced her to buy. Penny climbed out behind her wearing white. Armando immediately offered his hand. Lucas exited from the opposite side. He naturally slowed his pace until he was walking beside Samara. The 4 entered together. Halfway across the lobby, every Quinn executive stood, one after another. Good evening, Miss Quinn. Welcome, Miss Quinn. It's wonderful to see you again. Jacob blinked. He looked around, then behind himself. Surely they were greeting someone else. They weren't. Samara smiled politely. Good evening. Nothing more. No surprise. As if this happened every day. Because it did. Lucas noticed something. The senior executives weren't simply respectful. They were nervous. One elderly vice president actually straightened his tie before speaking to Samara. He quietly asked his assistant, "Has she always been this important?" The assistant whispered back, "More than you think." Before Lucas could ask another question, an elderly man descended the staircase. The chairman of Quinn Capital. Every conversation stopped. The old man ignored hundreds of guests. He walked directly toward Samara. Then smiled. "You're late." Samara looked at her watch. "I'm 3 minutes early." "That's 2 minutes later than usual for you." He reached over and adjusted a loose strand of her hair. "You've been spending too much time shopping." Penny immediately raised her hand, giving a sweet and unapologetic grin. "That one was my fault." The chairman laughed. "I guessed." He looked toward Armando. "And you must be the young man carrying all the bags in that pictures." Armando nodded once. "Yes, sir." "Good." Finally, the chairman's gaze landed on Lucas. "So?" Lucas met his eyes. "So?" The old man smiled. "I've heard quite a lot about you." Lucas glanced toward Samara. She looked just as surprised as he felt. Across the ballroom, Jacob slowly turned toward his father. "Why is the chairman talking to Samara?" Mr. Cross didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the small group. One of the Quinn executives happened to walk by. Mrs. Cross smiled politely. "Excuse me." "Yes." The young lady speaking with Chairman Quinn. The executive looked confused. "You mean Miss Samara Quinn?" "Yes." He smiled. "His granddaughter." The room suddenly felt very quiet. Jacob stared across the ballroom. 3 years. 3 years together. But he had never asked why every restaurant manager greeted her by name. Why every luxury store sent gifts. Why she could spend 10 million at an auction without blinking. Or why she never once looked impressed by money. Because she had always belonged to a world much bigger than his. Across the ballroom, Samara accepted a tiny dessert from Lucas. "Thank you. You always choose strawberry cake." "I do." She smiled and it reached her eyes. Lucas automatically smiled back like he couldn't help it. And this time, Jacob saw it. The ballroom still hadn't recovered. It wasn't loud shock. It was worse. The kind that settles into silence and makes every glass clink feel too sharp. Jacob stood very still. Not because he wanted to. Because his brain hadn't agreed with reality yet. Granddaughter. That word kept looping like a broken elevator. Across the room, Samara stood beside the chairman like she had always belonged there. Like the marble floor, the chandeliers, the entire empire above them had been waiting for her to arrive. Lucas noticed first. Not the title, not the status. The way Samara's posture changed when the chairman spoke to her. Not smaller. Not softer. Just familiar. Like someone had finally called her by her real name in a language only she understood. "You're actually related to him," Lucas said quietly. Samara took a sip of champagne. "Biologically, yes." That was a very calm answer. "I've had time to process it." "Since when?" She glanced toward the chairman. "Birth." Lucas paused. "That's not what I meant." "I know." That almost smile returned to her mouth, like it had somewhere to be. Lucas watched her a second longer than necessary. Then, carefully. "So all this time, Quinn Capital wasn't just a client." Samara tilted her head. "No." "A beat." "It's mine." The word didn't land like arrogance. It landed like a fact that had simply existed without permission to be noticed. Lucas exhaled once through his nose, like something had finally clicked into place behind his eyes. That explains a lot. Does it? You never react to money. I have never needed to. And the shopping. That is unrelated. Lucas looked at her. She didn't blink. He accepted it anyway. Of course it is. From across the room, Penny was watching them like she had just found her favorite show in unexpected high definition. Ooh, she whispered to Armando. This is the good part. Armando didn't look away from his drink. There's always a good part with you. That was romantic. That was observational. Meanwhile, Jacob finally started moving again. Not toward Samara. Toward answers. He approached a passing executive. Why didn't anyone tell me who she was? The man looked genuinely confused. Sir, you never asked. I didn't know there was anything to ask. A pause. Then, gently. She owns part of your portfolio. Jacob blinked. What? Quinn Capital is one of your primary silent investors. That sentence did not compute quickly enough. The executive continued, almost politely apologetic. The Sterling Group expansion you closed last year, approved through Quinn backing. Jacob's throat tightened slightly. That wasn't public. No. A glance toward Samara. She doesn't like publicity. Across the ballroom, Lucas had shifted slightly closer to her without fully realizing it. So, he said, quieter now, you were technically my company's investor before today. Samara nodded once. I read your proposal. It was clean. That's your feedback. It worked. Lucas let out a small laugh. Short, controlled, but real. I feel underreviewed. You survived, she said. That's a compliment. He looked at her like he was recalibrating something internal. You make everything sound like a risk assessment. I prefer certainty. And me. Samara paused. Just long enough for it to mean something. You're still being evaluated. Lucas' smile softened at the edges. That's the nicest threat I've ever received. From the far side of the room, Jacob saw it. Not just them speaking. Not just proximity. The ease. Like they weren't performing anything. Like they didn't need to be watched to exist properly. Something in him shifted. Not jealousy. Not yet. Recognition. He had never seen Samara look at him like that. Not once. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Jacob. Penny stood beside him now, holding a glass she wasn't drinking. You look like you're doing math in your head. I'm fine. You're not. She followed his gaze. Saw Samara. Saw Lucas. Understood immediately in a way that didn't require explanation. Oh, she said lightly, that's new. What is? That expression on her face. Jacob frowned. Penny tilted her head. She looks relaxed. A pause. Then, almost too gently. She never looked like that with you. The sentence didn't cut. It clarified. Jacob didn't respond. Because for the first time, he didn't have a reflex answer ready. Behind them, the chairman was now speaking with Lucas. Not formally. Curiously. You're Sterling, the chairman said. Yes, sir. And you're interested in my granddaughter. Lucas didn't flinch. I'm interested in understanding her. The chairman studied him for a moment. Then smiled faintly. That's the correct answer. Lucas nodded once. I assumed there was a correct one. There usually is, when people approach her. Lucas glanced briefly toward Samara. She doesn't seem like someone who enjoys being approached. She doesn't, the chairman agreed. A beat. Then. But she tolerates people who stay consistent. Lucas absorbed that. Noted. Across the ballroom, Samara was adjusting the moon necklace Penny had insisted on buying. Penny appeared beside her instantly. "You're thinking too much," she said. "I'm not thinking." "Yes, you are. I can see it in your face." Samara glanced at her. "What face?" "The one where you're pretending nothing is changing." Samara didn't answer. Penny leaned closer, softer now. "You like him?" It wasn't a question. Samara's eyes flicked briefly toward Luca's. Then away. "That's a strong word." Penny grinned. So is not denying it. Before Samara could respond, Lucas returned. He stopped beside her naturally, like he had always stood there. "Your grandfather invited me to dinner after this." Samara blinked. "That's unusual." "He said he wanted to see what kind of person keeps showing up in your orbit." "And you agreed." "I was already here." A pause. Then Lucas added, quieter. "Also, I was curious what kind of world you come from." Samara looked at him for a long moment. Then said, "You're standing in it." Lucas nodded slowly. "Good to know." From across the room, Jacob finally saw it clearly. Not just that Samara had changed, but that she hadn't. She had always been this. He was just the one who never learned how to look at her properly. His phone buzzed. His assistant. "Sir, the Sterling Group just secured a long-term expansion partnership." "Good," Jacob said automatically. A pause. "With Quinn Capital." Silence. Jacob looked up. Across the ballroom, Lucas and Samara were walking together now toward the terrace doors, conversation continuing like it had no beginning and no need for an ending. For the first time, Jacob didn't think. "She'll come back." He thought. When did I stop being part of her world? And worse, when did someone else start belonging in it so easily? The ballroom lights flickered across the glass as the terrace doors opened. Outside, the city waited. Inside, everything had already shifted. Quietly, irreversibly. Like a lock clicking, shut on a door no one realized had been closing. The ballroom still hadn't recovered. It wasn't loud shock, it was worse. The kind that settles into silence and makes every glass clink feel too sharp. Jacob stood very still. Not because he wanted to. Because his brain hadn't agreed with reality yet. Granddaughter. That word kept looping like a broken elevator. Across the room, Samara stood beside the chairman like she had always belonged there. Like the marble floor, the chandeliers, the entire empire above them had been waiting for her to arrive. Lucas noticed the way Samara's posture changed when the chairman spoke to her. Not smaller, but softer, familiar. Like someone had finally called her by her real name in a language only she understood. "You're actually related to him," Lucas said quietly. Samara took a sip of champagne. "Biologically, yes." That was a very calm answer. "I've had time to get used to it." "Since when?" She glanced toward the chairman. "Birth." Lucas paused. "That's not what I meant." "I know." That almost smile returned to her mouth, like it had somewhere to be. Lucas watched her a second longer than necessary. Then, carefully. "So all this time, Quinn Capital wasn't just a job." Samara tilted her head. "No." "A beat." "It's mine." The word didn't land like arrogance. It landed like a fact that had simply existed without permission to be noticed. Lucas exhaled once through his nose, like something had finally clicked into place behind his eyes. "That explains a lot." "Does it?" "You never react to money." "I have never needed to." "And the shopping. That is unrelated." Lucas looked at her. She didn't blink. He accepted it anyway. "Of course it is." From across the room, Penny was watching them like she had just found her favorite show in unexpected high definition. "Ooh," she whispered to Armando, "this is the good part." Armando didn't look away from his drink. It's always the good part with you. Oh, that was sweet. Just telling the truth. Meanwhile, Jacob finally started moving again. Not toward Samara. Toward answers. He approached a passing executive. Why didn't anyone tell me who she was? The man looked genuinely confused. Sir, you never asked. I didn't know there was anything to ask. A pause. Then, gently. She owns part of your portfolio. Jacob blinked. What? Quinn Capital is one of your primary silent investors. That sentence did not compute quickly enough. The executive continued, almost politely apologetic. The Sterling Group expansion you closed last year, approved through Quinn backing. Jacob's throat tightened slightly. That wasn't public. No. A glance toward Samara. She doesn't like publicity. Across the ballroom, Lucas had shifted slightly closer to her without fully realizing it. So, he said, quieter now, you were technically my company's investor before today. Samara nodded once. I read your proposal. It was clean. That's your feedback. It worked. Lucas let out a small laugh. Short, controlled, but real. I feel under-reviewed. You survived, she said. That's a skill. He looked at her like he was recalibrating something internal. You make everything sound like a risk assessment. I prefer certainty. And me. Samara paused. Just long enough for it to mean something. You're still being evaluated. Luca's smile softened at the edges. That's the nicest threat I've ever received. From the far side of the room, Jacob saw it. Not just them speaking. Not just proximity. The ease. Like they weren't performing anything. Like they didn't even realize they were being watched. Something in him shifted. He had never seen Samara look at him like that. Not once. Behind them, the chairman was now speaking with Lucas. You're the Sterling heir, the chairman said. Yes, sir. And you're interested in my granddaughter. Lucas didn't flinch. Of course, she's fascinating. The chairman studied him for a moment. Then smiled faintly. That's a good answer. Across the ballroom, Samara was adjusting her moon necklace as Penny appeared beside her. You're thinking too much, she said. I'm not thinking. Yes, you are. I can see it in your face. Samara glanced at her. What face? The face you're currently making. Samara didn't answer. Penny leaned closer, softer now. You like him? It wasn't a question. Samara's eyes flicked briefly toward Lucas, who was still speaking with her grandfather. Then away. That's a strong word. Penny grinned. That's not a denial. Before Samara could respond, Lucas returned. He stopped beside her naturally, like he had always stood there. Your grandfather invited me to dinner after this. Samara blinked. That's unusual. He said he wanted to see what kind of person keeps showing up in your orbit. And you agreed. Of course. A pause. Then Lucas added, quieter. Also, I was curious what kind of world you come from. Samara looked at him for a long moment. Then said, You're standing in it. Lucas nodded slowly. Good to know. From across the room, Jacob finally saw it clearly. Not just that Samara had changed, but that she hadn't. She had always been this. He was just the one who never learned how to look at her properly. His phone buzzed. His assistant. Sir, the Sterling Group just secured a long-term expansion partnership. Okay, Jacob said, unsure why he was being told. A pause. With Quinn Capital. Silence. Jacob looked up. Across the ballroom, Lucas and Samara were walking together now toward the terrace doors, conversation continuing like it had no beginning and no need for an ending. For the first time, Jacob didn't think. She'll come back. He thought. When did I stop being part of her world? And worse, when did someone else start belonging in it so easily? The ballroom lights flickered across the glass as the terrace doors opened. Outside, the city waited. Inside, everything had already shifted. Quietly, irreversibly. Like a lock clicking, shut on a door no one realized had been closing. The next morning, Rivergate woke up to exactly 3 headlines. The mystery, QNN heiress revealed. Who is Lucas Sterling's gala companion? The RIVRGT4 appear again. Samara slept through all of them. Penny did not. At 7:30 in the morning she called. Samara. Samara. You made the front page. A sleepy voice answered. We've all been in the paper. Not because you're accidentally flirting with someone. Samara finally opened one eye. I wasn't. You absolutely were. I was standing. Exactly. Across the city, Lucas was also looking at the article. The headline showed a photograph from the terrace. He and Samara weren't touching. They weren't even particularly close. They were simply looking at the city while talking. The photographer had somehow captured Samara smiling up at him. His assistant walked into the office. Congratulations. Lucas looked up. For what? The assistant placed the newspaper down. You've smiled twice in 1 week. Lucas looked at the picture. 3 times. The next day at Quinn Capital. Samara stepped out of the elevator carrying a coffee. Lucas was already waiting. You start work early. So do you. He noticed the cup. Caramel. Yes. You got me addicted too. How is that my fault? I seem to remember someone shoving their caramel coffee into my hands and then running off. I didn't run. Neither of them noticed the reception staff smiling. Just before lunch, Chairman Quinn walked into Samara's office. He placed a thin folder on her desk. What is this? A proposal. She opened it. Inside was a familiar company logo. Cross Holdings. Samara blinked. They're requesting additional investment. Her grandfather poured himself tea. What would you like to do? She read every page carefully. Every number, projection, and signature. After several quiet minutes, she closed the folder. The proposal is solid. It is. The management. She paused. It needs improvement. Her grandfather smiled. So, reject it. He paused. No personal reasons. She shook her head. If it were personal, I wouldn't have finished reading it. He nodded proudly. Very good. At almost the same moment, Jacob received the email. QUINN capital decision. Declined. No explanation. Just a professional refusal. For the first time, he understood something. Samara had never mixed her feelings with business. He had simply assumed she would always choose him anyway. That evening, Penny invited everyone to her apartment. I made dinner. Armando looked at the smoke coming from the kitchen. You attempted dinner. Lucas quietly opened a delivery app. Samara took one look at the blackened pan. Ordering sounds wise. 20 minutes later, 4 takeout bags covered the table. Penny looked guilty. I really tried. Armando kissed the top of her head. I know. She immediately smiled again. I'll improve. You don't have to. I want to. Samara watched them, then looked down at her noodles, frowning slightly. Lucas quietly moved the chili oil closer. She blinked. She was just thinking that it needed spice. You could tell. You prefer spicy foods. For some reason, nobody spoke for several seconds. Penny slowly looked at Armando. Armando was already looking back. They both smiled. After dinner, everyone walked downstairs together. The summer air was warm. Streetlights reflected across the river. Penny suddenly stopped. I forgot dessert. You brought 3 cakes. I forgot the ice cream. Before anyone could answer, she grabbed Armando's hand. Come with me. He sighed. Of course. They disappeared toward the corner store, leaving 2 people standing quietly beside the river. For almost a minute, neither spoke. Finally, Lucas looked at the water. I've been thinking. Samara looked over. That sounds serious. It probably is. Another pause. I like spending time with you. Samara answered immediately. I know. He laughed softly in response. I'm glad you know. I like spending time with you too. The answer arrived so naturally that she seemed surprised after saying it. Lucas turned toward her. So, I'd like to take you to dinner. We've had dinner several times. I know. This one would be different. She considered that. For exactly 5 seconds. Then nodded. Okay. No fireworks. No dramatic confession. Just one simple word. And somehow it felt bigger than all the grand gestures in the world. Across the street, hidden behind the convenience store window, Penny nearly dropped the ice cream. They're on a date. Armando glanced outside. They're standing. Physically, they're standing. Emotionally, they're on a date. He accepted that explanation. Fair enough. Several days later, the same shopping district that had once filmed Jacob buying jewelry for Penny was crowded again. Someone recognized Samara. Someone else recognized Lucas. A photo appeared online within minutes. Samara was holding a tiny paper cup. Lucas was holding 3 shopping bags. The captions spread across Rivergate faster than anyone expected. He carries her bags now. The top comment collected nearly 100,000 likes. She smiles at him using her whole face. Jacob saw the picture during another meeting. This time he didn't call. He didn't drive to Quinn residences or buy flowers. He simply looked at the screen for a long time, then quietly locked his phone. His friend watched him. You okay? Jacob looked through the conference room window. I kept waiting for her to come back. And he smiled. Small. Tired. Honest. I never realized she had already left. 1 month later, the Rivergate Business Journal published another photograph. Chairman Quinn stood in the center. Samara stood beside him. Lucas stood beside Samara. Penny and Armando somehow appeared in the background sharing dessert. The article wasn't about romance. It was about a new partnership between Quinn Capital and Sterling Group. But the comments ignored the business entirely. The Quinn heiress looks happier every week. Her friends look like family. Whoever takes that last slice of strawberry cake is very brave. Late that night, Samara stood on the balcony of her apartment. The city lights shimmered below. Lucas stepped beside her carrying 2 cups of caramel coffee. He handed it over. She took 1 sip, then quietly leaned her shoulder against his. Not because she needed support, because she wanted to. Below them, Rivergate continued exactly as it always had. But for the first time in a very long while, Samara wasn't trying to convince anyone to see her. Someone already did. And that, she decided while taking another sip of caramel coffee, was more than enough. The end. Thank you so much for listening to Dusklit Audio. Please leave a heart in the comments if you enjoyed the story.